Welcome to another edition of the Daily Night. I'm your host, Brian Smith, and today is a topic that I've been waiting to discuss for a very long time. I have just enough evidence to kind of give some backdrop to what I've been looking for, and that's how will UCF recruit against other Big 12 teams in terms of comparison, not necessarily recruiting against them head to head. Obviously, UCF is further out than the other schools by and large, other than maybe West Virginia. It's probably the furthest from the state of Texas. I'd imagine that there's going to be a lot of discussion about that on other podcasts, so we're going to leave that alone. So what I want to talk about is recruiting in a holistic manner. What does that mean? 2022, it means high school, junior college, and the transfer portal. UCF is arguably in Dixie the most dynamic from the three. You can make the argument. Ole Miss would be probably my pick and UCF second, but they're in the conversation. Ole Miss is in a state that has a lot of junior colleges, so that gives them an advantage in that area. And I believe they have around 17 transfers. UCF has 13 or 14, something like that coming in. I've lost track, but it's a lot, and they've gotten name brand prospects to transfer in. So that combined with the high school ranks makes UCF very unique. Same with Ole Miss. Same with a handful of other schools that have really hit the portal hard. Miami's done a good job with it, etc. But they've also done a good job in the Big 12 at picking up select guys. And I think this is something I'm going to have to adjust to. It's just not very easy to rank recruiting classes now because there's so much imbalance. You can't just rank a class on signing day, and you certainly can't just rank it right after, say early March when a lot of kids start making decisions because spring ball's starting, and then at the end of spring, if they don't like where they're at, there's more transfers. So to me, the biggest signing day is the one that doesn't happen, and that's late July, right before camp. Everything's settled. That's the true measurement of recruiting now, and we're getting close to that. There might be a couple more transfers, but anyway, let me start with this. Out of all the schools, and I've mentioned this before, but out of all the schools that are going to be in the Big 12 long-term that the Knights are going to compete with, I flat out believe Baylor is the most set up for success. Aranda is a very, very good head football coach. They went 2-7 in 2020, and they went and turned it around completely this last year and won the Big 12. That is tremendous. He does so with homegrown talent. I mean, they're in Texas. It's not rocket science there. It's about an hour and a half south of Dallas. Again, it's not very difficult when you're close to the Metroplex. And quite frankly, he has a lot of ties to Louisiana because he was the defense coordinator in the state of Louisiana at their premier institution, LSU. So they're probably going to get a few kids there. I can just kind of leave it at that for now. But Baylor is probably going to take a few transfers here or there too, just to kind of solidify, almost more like what Georgia or Alabama or somebody like that might. Ohio State or Notre Dame will take one or two. It's not going to go on the level like USC is or Ole Miss, but they are very selective. For UCF to compete with them, I'm going to bring them back up at the end. I think they're going to have to be very strategic because Aranda's a great coach and he's got a great staff, and everybody I've talked to likes the guy. So let's put them aside, but that is my team in my eyes that long-term after Texas and Oklahoma leave the Big 12, UCF will compete with the most. Who's second, though? Is there a definitive number two there? And I beat myself up on this for the last couple months. I don't really have a definitive answer. You could say Oklahoma State. Gundy does a tremendous job coaching, but they don't get as much talent as Baylor or the other schools inside the state of Texas. They just don't. Not consistently. What they did this last year just shows how good a coach he is and how good he is usually with hiring his coaching staff. He hired Jim Knowles, who's now at Ohio State, who took the big check and went to Buckeye Land. And they brought guys through, taught them the system. They weren't real good. They got a little better. And this last year, they were really good. They had some corners, which usually is the end-all, be-all if you're going to be a national top 20 D. And they were. But are they going to do that consistently? Probably not. I'd have to see more out of their ability to recruit the high school level at a higher level. And I would also have to see a little bit more, not just impact transfers, but impact transfers at impact positions. The guys they lost, they need to be bringing in. I mean, there's no nice way to say it. You can't lose corners and things go well for you. Just can't. So I'm not saying they're a flash in the pan, but that hurts. Who else? The other team that I think is ironic because UCF has been recruiting against them some is Iowa State. Iowa State is an outpost in college football historically. Watch out for them. They're in contention for that because they've got a really good coaching staff with Matt Campbell. Again, it's very similar to what Aranda does. They outcoach guys on Saturdays quite often with less talent. He's got a lot of young Florida players that are going to be now starting to be juniors and seniors. I'm curious to see what they can do the next year or two. They lost their quarterback, Purdy, but I don't think they'll be as bad off as teams maybe that they're in the conference similar because they're well coached and they've got a lot of athletes, a lot of 3-star athletes out of Florida. Look, I see them all the time at workouts, camps, practices, games. A lot of 3-star kids in Florida would be 4 or 5-star kids other places. So I have a lot of faith in them. The question I have for them, and it's my big albatross, much like Oklahoma State, not leaving, but coming, can they get the elite transfer to come to Ames, Iowa? Good luck with that. It's going to be very difficult. Again, it's kind of an outpost, small town. Who else are they going to recruit against to try to get to that Big 12 championship? The other team that I think is just a sleeping giant, and I know most of the Big 12 probably didn't want them in some way, shape, or form, is Houston. I've said many times that I'm not sure about Dana Holgorsen as a coach, but just recruiting against them, maybe it'll work out, maybe it will not. But you can open your door on signing day if you're in Houston. You're going to get a top 25 class if you've got good assistants. I don't know much about their staff, but that's the one that worries me. Holgorsen's not known as a recruiter, but it's Houston. I mean, you're already right there. And that also means you're home. This is the big one. If they do this right, and you got to play the game a little bit with your scholarship count, etc., you are the home team for kids that leave to go to Alabama, for teams that are kids that leave and go to a Big Ten school like Michigan, or go to Florida, or go to USC, or whatever, that leave the state. When they come back, it's one of the things that Malzahn and his coaching staff have done so well at UCF is welcome kids back home. If you don't get them the first time, that does not mean that you won't get them the second time. Houston is the sleeping giant, but I'm just not sure it's going to be short term. Dana's got to prove to me that he can get a bunch of transfers consistently. And they're a good coaching staff, and they've got players, etc. They might win the American Athletic Conference this year. Wouldn't surprise me. They might go in and win the Big 12 first year. Wouldn't shock me. But I need to see it consistently and see how well he recruits. So they put them on the burner. Who else? I mean, obviously Oklahoma and Texas, but that doesn't count. I mean, you're not going to just out-recruit Oklahoma and Texas. I'm not claiming that at all for UCF. They're not on that level yet, for high school kids specifically. Transfers, possibly. UCF's done one heck of a job, but leave those two out. Is there anybody else? Debatable. But I still think TCU with the right coaching staff could be that because they're in Dallas. Again, that's like coming home for a lot of kids if they get the right staff and all that. And I have no idea if they have. The other one that most people wouldn't think about, and this has shocked me to death, and I don't know anything about their staff. It's blowing me away. I believe I've got it pulled up here on my other screen. I want to say they have 20 commits already from the high school ranks. And I'm talking about the Texas Tech Red Raiders. That has always been, in a lot of ways, from the state of Texas perspective, the outpost of the programs that are D1 in Texas, because it's up in Lubbock. It's 5 hours from Dallas. It is really up there. It's further north than a lot of areas of the state of Oklahoma. So it gets a lot colder there. They have a true winter, etc. And quite frankly, it is shocking to me that they have done this. They literally have 20 players committed. And they've got a handful of 4-star kids, etc. Depending on how much value you want to put in that, I don't put a lot of stock in it anymore. It's very difficult to rank kids from state to state. I can tell you that from trying to do it myself. It's about impossible. But That being said, everybody loves rankings. If Texas Tech, I have no idea what their staff is doing, but if Texas Tech can consistently bring in classes that are top 25, and then they can get at least some junior college kids and or transfers that come back home to the state of Texas that, again, went off to Iowa or whatever, Northwestern or Florida State, whatever it is. Maybe they're the other team. It's possible they are too. And the reason I'm giving them leeway is the following. This is an epidemic in Florida in particular, so I'm a little more sensitive to it. But kids just want to leave their home states right now. The biggest albatross in that statement is the state of Alabama. Those kids predominantly go to about 4 schools, and I'm pretty sure most people know who they are. Okay, Georgia, Clemson, Alabama, and Auburn. Those kids, that's the one state that's incredibly loyal to a very, very small base of programs, and I don't know why, but it is. I know there's good football there historically and all that, but Florida used to be that way too, and it's completely polar opposite. The kids, the better players especially, are leaving Florida, and a lot of the better players are leaving Texas. So for them to have, and by the way, 19 of the 20 kids that Texas Tech has committed, 19 are from within the Lone Star State borders. That's impressive. And they're recruiting from top to bottom. They actually have an offensive lineman from Lubbock. It's way north Texas, up in the Panhandle. And they have a kid from Humble, which is a north suburb of Houston, which is far southeast part of Texas. They're recruiting the entire state and doing well. They're my pick to kind of surprise people because what little I've heard, and I'll be honest, I didn't have any faith in them doing that great because it's Texas Tech. And quite frankly, on top of that, I didn't have much faith in them keeping most of these kids. Once I saw them get to like 12, 14 commits, I'm like, some of these kids will decommit, blah, blah, blah. They're at 20. Now, I'm guessing they've had at least one kid decommit because almost everybody has by now. It's just the nature of recruiting in the year 2022. Still, they're at 20, 19 of which are from their home base, which means they have a higher propensity to stay. If you recruit all out-of-state kids, it's more likely you have decommits. That's been proven numerous times. It's just proximity. Now you're in a situation where if you can just add a little zest, if you will, to your pasta with some transfers, that's a heck of a meal. Maybe Texas Tech is the new team to watch out for. If you can finish this class, obviously, and then back it up, you need not one, you need 2. Let's be clear. You need back-to-back classes to take that step up, especially on defense. Historically, the Red Raiders have been porous on D, and I'm not going to get into all the different things that go into that. But number one, and I know this is part of college football, it's not going to change. Location matters. History matters. They are not on the side of that. Even though they're in Texas, again, it's 5 hours from Dallas. It's a long way. At best, hauling, it's 4.5 to 4:45. So it's a long drive. Now, here's the final piece for Texas Tech. If they do really well, can they keep their coach? I'm just going to throw that out there. When coaches do well, somebody's going to offer them money. And Lord have mercy, there's a lot of money being thrown around in college football right now. So why would I expect it to go down? So last point, back to Baylor. I did a piece today on, I don't even know how to pronounce this, Siaka Ika. He's the D tackle / nose guard at Baylor. He's massive. He's a transfer from LSU. Aranda knew him. He came over to play for Baylor, and he's a dominant player. Ironically, and this, if I didn't know from watching him and know how big he was, I would think that he was overrated. But like Kuiper has him, I believe, at 16th in the 2023 draft. He'll be draft eligible. But he only made 24 tackles. And you're probably saying, how in the world can that be? Well, let's be very clear. As I noted in the article at Inside the Knights, you cannot, under any circumstance, have a 350-pound man, and that's probably conservative, running into your quarterback. Period. If you can get a program like Baylor, and you're not going to get a kid like Ika every year, even if you're Alabama, Baylor, whoever. But if you can consistently get the nose guard in the 3-4 defense, that Dave Aranda wants to run and will run, that's scary. They're getting that special piece. Not only can they be the Big 12 title team, they can be a national contender consistently. And it's one of the reasons I wrote the article, because I'm fascinated with him. You have to double team him. He is one of the most frustrating players in recent college football memory for offensive coordinators, because even though he's not going to make any tackles, he dominates the game because he changes your blocking scheme on every play. That's what UCF is really recruiting is, and that's how you have to approach it. Ironically, UCF has probably the second best guy. He's a little younger, but it's the same deal. Lee Hunter, he's not quite as big as Ika. He's 320-ish, give or take, depending on how many hot dogs he had today. But he's 320, and he's a mountain of a man. Teams that have that or have that special player are the ones that I'm going to denote the best for UCF, for anybody else to have an opportunity to make a big jump in recruiting, because there's a handful, I think, UCF being one, by the way, that will kind of come up. Baylor, etc., will stay there because they've got a great staff. But there'll be some other fly-by-night classes, etc. Houston has a chance. Texas Tech, as I just mentioned. Iowa State's got more talent than people give them credit for, and they got a good coaching staff. TCU's kind of a wild card. I have no faith in West Virginia. It's an outpost. BYU has a unique situation because of the Mormon mission. They have guys that take 2-year Mormon missions. They're a little older. They get bigger. They get stronger after they come back. Bottom line, it's a really big hodgepodge of teams that we just don't know. Baylor's my one definitive program that I think will be good. Anybody else that we think will be consistent? Kansas State takes a lot of JUCO kids, etc. I don't know. Kansas is always struggles to get talent. Texas and Oklahoma are getting ready to leave. Oklahoma State, it just depends on what defensive talent they have. They can coach, absolutely, no question. West Virginia, much like Kansas, I have no faith in them being consistently good. They have good players sometimes, but not enough depth. They just don't. Cincinnati, I'm sure a lot of people are waiting on that. I'm not even worried about that because they've proven they can be good. Here's the only question with them, and that's why I'm not bringing them up any further than this. How long is Luke Fickell going to be there? That's my only question. I hope he stays there a long time. He's a good coach. Heard good things about him, but he bleeds scarlet and gray. If Ryan Day leaves, which probably eventually he'll take an NFL job, in 12 seconds or less, he'll be the Ohio State head coach. Whether it's signed or not is irrelevant. He will be the next Ohio State head coach. So I get it. Can't get a much better job than that. And he played for the Buckeyes, and he grew up in the state. But Cincinnati's going to be just fine. They're doing well recruiting. I just don't know how long Luke's going to be there. But if he is, they're in the hunt. I just have my doubts. There's just so much money get thrown around, and it's Ohio State. So to reiterate, Baylor, in my opinion, is the team that people are shooting for long term. They're established. They're the Big 12 champs. Dave Aranda is a very good coach. He's very, very well respected, and he's brought in good classes, and he's found the specific piece. That's why most teams don't like running any form of a 3-man front, because usually, depending, there's some exceptions, but most teams want to run a front with a big nose guard. There just aren't that many guys that can take that punishment of getting double teamed. And Ika certainly gets double teamed the majority of the time, or they run away from him. You're not going to handle him with one guy. That's what UCF has to shoot for. You have to shoot for it at receiver, etc. And UCF has killed it in the transfer portal with receivers. They got 2 guys that are coming in that are good enough to start. Baker, I like his physical upside. Obviously, Hudson, he was the leading receiver at Auburn this past year. When you bring in guys like those 2, you're changing your roster. UCF now has to step up and get a few more high school kids to help stay on pace. Baylor, I believe the Bears, I want to say they're around 12 to 14 commitments. They're not where Tech is, but Baylor, they got 14 commitments, including a kid that I'm going to see this next week. I'm going out to Los Angeles to see the Elite 11. And I think that it's pretty evident that Novosad is not just interested in Ohio State. He's been there a couple times. If they lose him, that'll hurt. That's the one thing. He is a dude. He's one of the most accurate players in the country, but he's a possible game changer. If he does stick with Baylor, he took a visit there last weekend. That's their guy this year because, again, quarterback. I mean, if you didn't know this, here it is. Most important position on the field. If you're watching this podcast, you've heard me say that 5 million times in other podcasts, and it's just the way it is, especially with the rules today. Name's Austin Novosad. Very, very good player. He's from Dripping Springs, Texas. What a name. But the kid can spin it. If Ohio State wants you at quarterback, you're pretty good. That's the first thing to note. Next, can they get another guy now to replace Ika? At least every other year, you got to get that guy. That's the danger of that defense they run, but I'm still sticking with them. 1. 2, I'm going to go kind of out on a limb because I like the energy. I'm going Texas Tech as the other team to kind of watch. I don't know what it is they're selling. I'm just jumping in, kind of taking a flyer. And then the other teams, I'm going to go Iowa State first to really compete with. And Cincinnati and Houston, ironically, because they're joining UCF from the outside, if you will, coming to the Big 12, or the other teams that I think will recruit really well. The wild card of all wild cards is BYU because of the Mormon mission. They can recruit not just nationally, but globally. With the, that's a religious institution. They've got some football history that's incredible. So I have no idea how to grade their recruiting because they got guys going on missions and stuff. That is just very difficult. I'm not even going to try. The last thing that I'll say, UCF just needs to hit a couple more notches with high school recruiting, or maybe a junior college kid. That's another way to do it, specifically on defense consistently. And they've done a really good job with the portal, but if they're going to catch what Baylor's doing, they got to do it every year. And so far, they've done a good job since Malzahn. It was, I believe, 15th of February, 2021. He's not even been on the job a year and a half. Lord have mercy, has he done a great job getting kids to transfer to UCF once they hit the portal. And now they got to come to fruition and make some things happen. So anyway, I just kind of wanted to give my 2 cents about what is UCF recruiting against. Baylor is, in my opinion, by far at the top of the board, but teams like Iowa State, Houston, etc., Cincinnati, kind of in that group with UCF. The team that's intriguing is Texas Tech, and then you got BYU. To a certain extent, Oklahoma State too. I should give them some credit. They've done more with less than hardly anybody else can compare with them in the last 10 years with what they do. But I like where UCF's at. They just need to take another step up if they want to catch Baylor. So check us out. Inside the Knights, going to have some more previews of players. Today I had Jeremiah John Baptiste, and he's a great football player for the Knights. I think he's the key to the defense this next year on a very short list of talented inside linebackers around the college football that can play the run and the pass the way he does. I think he's going to have a very big year. Then he's going to get drafted. That's what I think. I've got other profiles going up every day, and I've got some guys helping me, some interns. Thank you to you guys. Andrew's helping me out a lot, and I've got a couple other guys helping out. So please make sure you check out Inside the Knights on Fan Nation. Everybody have a great day, and thank you very much.